Raged from 49 BCE to 45 BCE, this conflict not only marked the end of the Roman Republic, but also laid the groundwork for the rise of the Roman Empire. Let's take a deep dive into the history, strategy, political motivations, and key figures behind this landmark event in world history. Grab your togas and let's begin. Before we examine the war itself, we need to understand the political landscape of Rome in the late 50s BCE. The Roman Republic was already in turmoil by the time Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BCE. Rome's political structure, although a republic, had long been plagued by internal conflict between the aristocracy and the Senate, and the populares, those who sought to implement reforms to benefit the plebeians or common people. At the center of this conflict were three men: Caesar, Pompey the Great, and Crassus, collectively known as the First Triumvirate. This informal political alliance was meant to consolidate power and bypass the traditional republican checks and balances, but it was unstable. After Crassus died in 53 BCE, the balance tipped, and Pompey, once Caesar's ally, began to drift towards supporting the Senate. At this point, Caesar, having expanded Roman territory through his conquest of Gaul, found himself with immense military power. But his increasing popularity among the people, coupled with his growing military successes, alarmed Pompey and many in the Senate who feared Caesar's potential to become a tyrant. In 49 BCE, the crisis came to a head. The Senate, fearing Caesar's rise, ordered him to disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen, which would strip him of his power. Caesar, however, had other plans. Faced with the prospect of political and personal ruin, Caesar defied the Senate's orders and famously crossed the Rubicon River with his army, declaring, "The die is cast by crossing the Rubicon." Caesar effectively declared war on the Roman Senate and Pompey, who was allied with it. This action would not only set the stage for a civil war, but it symbolized the collapse of the traditional Roman republican system, where the Senate held power over military commanders. The phrase "crossing the Rubicon" has since come to mean a point of no return, and indeed, Caesar's decision was a gamble that would change the fate of Rome. The war began with Caesar's swift march toward Rome. Pompey, despite his considerable military experience, hesitated to confront Caesar directly in Italy. He instead chose to retreat to the east, gathering forces in Greece and the eastern provinces. This was a critical mistake, as it allowed Caesar to seize Rome and its resources with minimal resistance. The first significant battle of the war was the Battle of Ilerda 49 BCE, fought in modern-day Spain. Here, Caesar's forces, despite being outnumbered, used superior tactics and maneuvering to decisively defeat the Pompeian army. This victory gave Caesar control over Hispania and further boosted his position. Meanwhile, Caesar was also focusing on securing Rome itself, and in 48 BCE, he decisively defeated Pompey's forces in a series of battles, culminating in the Battle of Pharsalus. The Battle of Pharsalus, fought in 48 BCE in central Greece, was a turning point in the war. Despite being outnumbered, Caesar's forces achieved a decisive victory. Pompey, forced to flee, eventually sought refuge in Egypt, where he was assassinated upon arrival, marking the end of his involvement in the war. Caesar's stay in Egypt led to an interesting political development. He became involved in the affairs of the Egyptian throne, famously starting a liaison with Queen Cleopatra VII. Their relationship would later bear fruit when Cleopatra gave birth to Caesar's son, Ptolemy XV Caesar, also known as Caesarion. Although Pompey was dead, resistance to Caesar's rule continued in various parts of the empire. In 47 BCE, Caesar turned his attention to North Africa, where the remnants of Pompeian forces had gathered. The Battle of Thapsus, fought in 46 BCE, was another key victory for Caesar as he crushed the remaining Pompeian forces in Africa. By the time the Battle of Munda was fought in 45 BCE in Spain, the civil war had effectively concluded. Caesar's legions, once again victorious, shattered the last organized resistance to his rule. With this final battle, Caesar had solidified his control over the entire Roman world. With the war over, Caesar returned to Rome, where he implemented a series of reforms aimed at centralizing power in his hands. He enacted laws for land redistribution, reorganized the calendar into the Julian calendar, and expanded the Senate, though these actions were seen by many as attempts to solidify his grip on power. However, Caesar's rule was far from secure. His concentration of power and the fear that he intended to become a monarch led to his assassination on the Ides of March in 40 for BCE by a group of conspirators, including some of his closest allies like Brutus and Cassius. Caesar's death did not bring an end to the power struggle in Rome. His assassination plunged the Republic into another round of civil war, which eventually led to the rise of Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, who would become Augustus, the first Roman emperor. The civil war of Caesar was more than just a struggle for power. It was the final nail in the coffin for the Roman Republic. Caesar's rise to power shattered the old political structures and set the stage for the imperial system that would dominate Rome for centuries to come. His life and legacy have inspired countless debates, from his military genius to his authoritarian rule. Whether you see him as a hero, a tyrant, or something in between, Julius Caesar's impact on history is undeniable. That's it for today's deep dive into Caesar's civil war. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below with your thoughts on Caesar's legacy. How do you think the war changed the course of history? Let's discuss.